Welcome to the Rare Earth Exchanges podcast, where power, politics, and the world's most coveted materials collide. Rare earth elements power the backbone of tomorrow's most critical technologies. With China dominating global production, the U.S. and its allies must align strategically to ensure a stable future. This urgency prompted tech entrepreneurs Daniel O'Connor and Dustin Olson to launch Rare Earth Exchanges, a news and insight platform built to equip stakeholders and decision makers with the tools and intelligence needed to reduce dependency and build prosperous resilience. Let's get into it.
Everyone, welcome back to the Rare Earth Exchanges podcast. Today, you're joined by me, Dustin, my co-host Daniel, and our special guest, Edward Chan, who's the CEO and founder of Metasorbix. Edward, welcome to the show. How are you doing?
Thank you very much. This is an exciting opportunity for us to discuss the important topic for the nation.
Absolutely. We're excited to hear what Metasorbix is up to and kind of what makes you guys unique. But before we get to all of that, we would love to hear first a bit about your background and kind of the story, the journey that led up to founding this company.
Okay, I'm a trained chemical engineering by trade, coming out of Caltech and Princeton, and been in the corporate world for quite a while, 20 some odd years, and ended up in the C-suite managing 4 countries in R&D. And from there, I went into the nanomaterial space, 3 startups, tubes, nano platelets, which is graphene. And then today, looking at this particular space, using graphene as a platform to extract rare earth mineral from waste.
That's great. And how long have you been doing this? How long have you been in the industry?
In the startup space, around 10 years, 10, 11 years. Specifically for Metasorbix on this project, we started in 2023.
Got it. Okay, so it's fairly new.
Mm-hmm.
Let's talk about really quick what were you seeing in the industry that ultimately led you to start Metasorbix?
Back in the day when we had COVID, we're kind of wondering what we're going to do because we cannot travel, we cannot meet people. Fundamentally, we have to kind of rethink about how we do business. And if you're going to do business as a startup, we might start looking at this from a blank slate. What problem do we want to solve that would be impactful and that would be a legacy for us? So that's how we started. And we chose climate for one, climate change. And then eventually we see that as a platform to solving another major problem in supply chain, and that's rare earth minerals.
Interesting. Interesting that COVID was kind of the trigger to kind of reevaluate where to put your focus. So with Metasorbix and rare supply chain, where do you guys fit into the supply chain? What is your specialty?
If you look at the entire supply chain of rare earth extraction and then eventually to magnets, you got the mines or the rocks, you got the waste or fly ash that we're looking at. Then you got a step to kind of like call it beneficiation, crush them into smaller pieces. Then you got extraction, we call it leaching. Then you got separation, purification, metallization, alloying, and then you got magnets. So we fit right in the middle of the separation stage.
Okay. So separation, refining, do you guys do anything with recycling?
The way that we think about our mission is waste to feedstocks. So we're going to be using a secondary source, fly ash, specifically type C, coal fly ash. Since you're in Utah, you're probably going to be very familiar with the Powder River Basin. That's a kind of coal fly ash we're going to be tapping into.
Yep.
In terms of recycling, this is a major point because the amount of rare earth in fly ash is on the order of 300 ppm. So imagine you use a ton of fly ash and you get 300 grams of rare earth coming out of it. What it leaves you is a humongous amount of secondary waste. So we are looking at recycling of the secondary waste after we extract rare earth to redeploy that into cement. So kind of a circular format in what we do.
I mean, I could jump in and say that a big challenge right now is there's the upstream challenge of accessing feedstock and at scale, and that's a work in progress. It takes 19 years to build a mine. It takes a long time. And during that process, there's up and downs in the market, and the price can collapse, and all these mines go out of business. And then they get bought up by some other country. And the hardest part of that is separation at scale. It's not done at scale in the United States or anywhere out of China right now. Maybe a little bit in Linus in Malaysia, and Energy Fuels a little bit here. MP's trying to start to ramp up now. But then you have this waste product that if you could go in and you could treat, separate, and create the feedstock, and then use the byproduct for something else, that could be a valuable contribution to rebuilding a supply chain over here. Is that a premise, a good premise, what I just shared?
That's exactly what we are looking at. We're looking at the shortened time frame of extracting minerals. I think Rio Tinto trying to buy out another copper mine, that fell through. And the reason why they do that is exactly what you just said. It takes a long while to activate a mine, to make it productive. And so the big companies nowadays say, forget this, let's just go buy somebody and start optimizing the current mines that we have. So our mindset is, let's not figure out that process. It is what it is, but look at a more immediate source of material that we can access. In this case, mine tailings could be one of them. But coal fly ash in the U.S., this is being tabulated by UT Austin. 5 billion tons of this stuff is sitting around.
So on that note, I think this is important. We speak with experts out there. We have a pretty wide network at this point. And, when we talk about either recycling on the one hand or reuse of mine tailings or coal fly ash, etc., there's some skepticism. And yet there are startups that are starting to look at these activities. Could you educate the audience when it comes to coal fly ash? Like, are there different approaches? How is your approach different? And maybe break it down for more of a lay reader, even though we have scientists and pretty sophisticated people. It would be helpful to try to break it down and simplify it so that more people can understand what are different types of approaches, and why you feel good about this approach.
Let's talk about the current approach. And then we'll go into the different approaches that we're seeing, and then our own approach, which is highly differentiated. The current approach is called solvent extraction, and that's been practiced in China and Malaysia through Linus, etc. Mm-hmm. And what that is I'm going to talk about it chemically and then use an analogy. Solvent extraction is to use organic plus an extractant inside the organic in a big bath of water. The water, you got all of the ions, the rare earth ions dissolved in it after leaching. And the objective is to have the solvent, organic, to absorb that little bit of ions in the water. So imagine, as an analogy, you were asked to separate a penny and a dime. I mean, they're pretty small differences. You cannot see it. You have a box of pennies and dimes in a cardboard box. You stick your hand in there. You're supposed to separate it yourself, not seeing it. And that's the extent of solvent extraction. You got to have many, many boxes to separate the dimes and the pennies. And this is where the process disadvantage of solvent extraction is. You have many, many stages, like 100 stages to extract enough rare earth out of it. So today, what we're looking at coming from the outside is this is very process intensive and reagent intensive, water, acid, caustic, etc. Let's look at it from a standpoint of material science. So let's not have 100 stages, let's say 10 stages, but engineer the material in a way that would be effective. And what I mean by that is capacity. That's the number one KPI that we're driving toward. If you have a high capacity to extract per mass of extractant, then you have less stages to use. And this is where the excitement going to be focusing on, is looking at the material side of things. So from a standpoint of some of the other technologies, you got ionic liquids coming out of Oak Ridge, coming out of Georgia Tech. That group is looking at that particular approach. You got membrane, so it's kind of like a filtration mechanism. And then you got some of the electrochemical things going on that attract certain ions versus some of the other contaminant ions. Our approach is material-based, but we're looking at a very specific platform called graphene. There we got a lot of knobs that we can control: surface area, active sites, ligands, and also the coordination chemistry.
Sorry to interrupt you, Edward. Did you say graphene?
Yeah, graphene.
Okay, yeah, that's a fascinating. I think we need to explain to the audience what that is too.
Okay. Graphene used to be on top of everybody's mind back in 2018 when it was in vogue. Now no one knows what that is. So graphene is a nanomaterial with high surface area, very stable in the sense of acid and base chemistry in the extraction of rare earth. And from a standpoint of engineering material, this is the same platform we're using to control active sites, ligands, and spatial density to absorb different ions.
So, and graphene, it's a human-made, it's not natural.
Yeah, it's synthetic.
It's synthetic. And so your technology is using this nanomaterial as a way to filter?
I would call it absorption.
Absorption?
Yeah, just basically it's the same as solvent extraction. They use the extractant to absorb the ions.
Right.
Except we're using a solid solvent to absorb the ions.
So you're using the solid, and is this something that is patented?
Yeah, in fact, we got one allowed belonging to Metasorbex. We got 3 applications submitted. 1 is in a non-provisional state. 2 is in a provisional state.
Okay. So you have this proprietary approach. Now, before we get deeper into the technology, let's talk about, so most of the material is currently refined in mainland China, and it's all SX, like you said. Why is that? I mean, there's large amounts of money that are being deployed in China to continuously innovate. Why are they still stuck? And everybody tells us, oh, you got to do solvent extraction. Nothing else works at scale. Are you going to prove that wrong?
The innovation on solvent extraction today is around the margins. The fact that they started the process so early back in, I don't know, in the 80s, 1990s.
Late 80s, early 90s, I think.
If they were to change the entire process, they're going to have a lot of stranded assets, number one. So if you're in a large company, as I was, if you're going to change assets or stranded assets, you're going to get fired.
Yeah.
Right? It's just bottom line. You cannot just go into DuPont and say, hey, I'm going to mess up everything up. I'm going to try some new things. It doesn't fly.
You're cannibalizing your whole revenue.
Yeah. Now, you can do it in parallel, but the fact that bulk of your earnings is coming from this major plants that diverting resources to R&D effort doesn't make sense. So that's number one. The second thing is, believe it or not, this is not a very sexy space. We're not artificial intelligence. We're not anything like that. And so the talent base, the skill base that would attract goes to AGI. It doesn't go to advanced materials or solvent extraction. So there's a lack of skill base in this area versus the AGI type of technology.
Right. So I guess what you're saying, and you correct me if you think I'm wrong, but the Chinese companies, the state-backed companies that dominate this space, they've had such a kind of a monopolistic position. They really haven't had to innovate that much.
There's no competition.
That's right. In fact, you know what, Edward? The CCP and their president has to lecture these companies to innovate. You're in trouble if you're getting lectured by the CCP about having to innovate.
Think about this as another analogy. Kodak. Back in the day, we used buy films and do things like this, right? Click on cameras. They were the first one to innovate on the digital camera. But guess what? The management, senior management say that's not going to work. That's going to cannibalize our current business. Same thing here.
Yeah. No, I could totally see that. So, well, let's get, and then Dustin, jump in a minute, but let's get into where, with this approach, how far are you along in the life cycle? Let's just say there's, alpha, beta, maybe a proof of concept, pilot, early commercial. Like along that spectrum, where are you at today?
We're at TLL3. We're in lab. So we're not very far along, but we are getting some good discussions with different states to entertain collaboration and share costing. So one is Louisiana, one is Wyoming.
Speaking of your technology, can we talk about how it's different? So you said solvent extraction, 100 stages. Where's yours different? Where do you gain efficiencies to move away from solvent extraction?
Give you a kind of a quantitative feel. Today's solvent extraction on a normalized basis is on the order of 5 to 10 milligrams per gram. So 10 milligrams of rare earth extraction, rare earth material to a gram of extracted. We're 10 times that. So the capacity to absorb, meaning to collect all of the ions in one setting, we don't need as many stages. The second thing that we're doing is because we can tune the spatial geometry or density of those ligands to coordinate with the ions. That spacing is important because that's basically is going to be the desorption stage to separating different ions against the contaminant ions. So there's two factors that we have going on in our lab that's going to be very different.
Okay, interesting. So you can do 10 times the amount of processing. Is that in half as many stages, or do you still have 100 stages if you can just do more?
In terms of stages, as long as we can pick a number, extract, say, 95% of the rare earth inside the aqueous solution that's being leached, that's good enough. Or if you want to do more, they have more stages. But the capacity that allows you to separate 10 times is going to be very cost effective.
Okay, so speaking of costs, sorry, Daniel, just one more question. Solvent extraction, it's been around for a long time. It's cost effective. A lot of people implement it. Is yours cost effective as well? Is it more expensive, although more efficient? Where do you guys land in terms of cost structure?
I mean, this is all projection, right? We don't have the full cost analysis or full trial yet. But we believe that because of the capacity and the selectivity of the material, we're going to be much more cost effective than today's solvent extraction in CapEx and in OpEx. And one of the things that we are pushing is instead of looking at this centralized plant that we are deploying or China is deploying, looking at this in a modular format. In other words, go to where the source is going to be and set up a small shop, so to speak, to extract the material and not to wait under this big mine. You have this big giant plant to construct. So having a modular format give us faster time to extract than having large plants because of just construction.
So on that note, and that makes sense, and we've interviewed some other companies that focus on more recycling, where it's more decentralized, modular. We've interviewed companies that build large modular refineries, big but modular. Have you done any testing for heavy rare earths like terbium or dysprosium? Do you have any metrics you could share based on the lab results so far?
We are focusing on the big four. So you just talked about two of them: dysprosium, terbium, the heavier ones, and then praseodymium, neodymium. From a standpoint of the adjacency of those two different groups, we believe that we can extract 10x the separation. So the difficulty of separating terbium and dysprosium is because they're so close together in properties. And the fact that we can engineer the thermodynamics of capture the Gibbs free energy, that we can actually separate them much easier.
Well, that's very important because you don't hear this much in the news, but you hear it at the rare earth exchanges. We're headed towards a very severe crunch. I mean, it's going to be really bad soon. Already, companies don't know what to do. So let's just, I know you all are, it's a new company. It's just a couple years old. You're raising capital. Walk us through, let's say capital is raised. What's the use of funds? How will you get us from where we are today to an alternative source And how long will that take?
The use of funds is simple. Coming from the corporate background, we are very capital efficient. In other words, we're not going to spend money, cutting metal. We're going to be leveraging the process or part of the equipment either in Wyoming or in Louisiana, and we're going to be owning the material only. So we're going to be looking at producing material, the solvent that we are looking at to extract rare earth. So the first thing that we are looking at is to hire at least 2 PhDs, one in chemistry and one in engineering. And basically that's going to replace me so that we can do more work together in our lab. That would get us to stage TOL 4 or 5 using the $3 million. We're going to be looking at matching funds at different states to basically amplify the equity capital. So after the first stage going into Series A, we're looking at to raise $10 million. That would bring us to TOL 6 or 7. The materials, we're going to be looking at extracting, say 1 million tons of fly ash to get, say, 10 tons of products.
Right.
10 ppm as a metric. So that's going to be the stage that we're looking at to progress from today at $3 million capital raise to $10 million. We're going to be very lean in personnel because we don't want to carry the fixed cost. We're going to be leveraging universities where we have matching grants so that we can be more effective.
And what's a timeline to proof of concept? Let's say, capital raise happens in 2026. Based on your planning, when do you produce a report that says, here's the output, here's the percent, here's the purity, grade, and we want to start doing business with magnet companies that need it? Like, when would that ballpark? How far away are you?
The $3 million going to be 24 months of runway. This is not counting the matching grants.
Matching grants, right?
We're not counting that matching grant. It's going to be just standalone $3 million. If you get matching grants and for longer, we're going to be getting to the point of supplying on the order of several kilograms of rare earth oxide downstream to the magnet producers. So they're going to be looking at metallization and alloying of that. In terms of the next round of funding, we're targeting a minimum of 10 kilo type of size.
10 kilo
of rare earth oxides.
Okay. So, at scale, let's just say, you go through these exercises, 24 months. What does it look like at scale? Like, you can locate these in some decentralized areas, Wyoming. Now, are you licensing this to some other mining company, or are you running this yourself? What's your business model?
Yeah, that's a good question. In terms of what we like to do, our business model is just to supply the consumables, the solvent, and license the technology or the process to a rare earth oxide producer.
Right. So you're providing a very valuable piece of the value chain, and it's done through a license or however the transaction happens. And what's the rate? So you can process it 10. I'm just trying to get a sense of how much you could produce. Per modular facility, how much rare earth can you produce a year, both the lights and the heavies?
We are targeting on the order of 100 tons per year at scale.
100 tons at scale
per plant, per modular unit.
Per plant. So that, you must be going through an awful lot of coal ash. How much of the output are you? How much of the input waste are you going through?
It is almost 1-for-1, right? Because if you look at the UT Austin's analysis, the magnetic rare earth is under 50 ppm, give or take. So a ton of fly ash can produce a ton of waste minus the 50 ppm.
Right.
So we are going to be processing a lot of coal fly ash. That's why Wyoming is attractive.
Right. Maybe talk about that a little bit. For the audience, why is this particular region important for coal fly ash? Maybe just break it down.
Right now, in fact, we just spoke with them today. They have around 10 million tons of fly ash sitting uncapped. It sounds a lot, but it's not a lot. And they have Type C cold fly ash. Now that's important because Type C is easier to extract rare earth, which is Type F. Type F is encapsulated with silicates, so it's difficult to pull out the rare earth. So Type C or the mountain or the Powder River Basin coal is ideal for us to extract the rare earth. And the second thing that's important is because they have an active landfill and the coal mines, not the coal mines, the coal-fired plants, they won't be shutting down anytime soon. They're pretty new, whereas the different part of the country in eastern part, some of those are mothballed. And what that means is the impoundment of fly ash is capped. That has problems in terms of permitting.
So Type C, can you delineate for a lay person, what is Type C coal fly ash?
There are different minerals inside a coal, and therefore coal fly ash. Type C has much more calcium than, but less rare earth elements than Type F. Type F is more toward the Appalachian type of coal, whereas Type C is right down to the Powder River.
Okay. And so the coal coal is carbon. So what happens? So geologically, that waste is the other things just in there, or do they go in there from the processing of the making the coal in the first? Like when does geologically, and maybe that's a question you might not be able to answer, but if you can, like we have geologists look at geologically, how do the rare earths get into the coal waste?
Yeah, I'm not a geologist, but talking with folks who are specialists in this area, coal seams have those type of elements in there already. So the rare earth is not being created during pulverization or gasification.
Mm-hmm. And I'm assuming, is there any thorium or uranium?
That I don't know. No, that I do know. The mines have thorium and uranium, but the coal seams do not, because the analysis coming out of Kentucky did not show that.
Okay. And that's important, right? Because that would be another layer of
that's bad news.
Compliance processes and procedures. So it sounds like, now let's talk a little bit. There is this urgency for heavy rare earths now. Maybe we may have a surplus of light rare earths within 24 months, maybe. But so there is an emergency need. Let's just say, come November, China shuts off all access to rare earths. All. They're powering their own economy. Maybe there's some other things going on. We're in deep trouble at that point. There's an emergency. Edward Chan and company can set up these emergency separation facilities, correct?
That's why modular concept makes sense.
Yes. So, that could be, part of a business. I think there's going to be a need for some urgency, I think, based on what we know. Okay. So, I think that, have you thought through in your business plan sort of urgency contingencies where, maybe that it's more cost and you'll have to be paid for that, but you'll be able to mobilize faster. How far away are we from that? You still are in the lab. Like, how far, if there is an emergency, if there's a national emergency and we need to get these important elements fast, how confident are you?
The critical path for us to scale is human beings. Like I need to hire several, maybe 4 or 5 PhDs and
PhDs.
just hammering at the chemistry and refinement, and more importantly on the process, because they are linked together. The material, if we can have access to Wyoming's Type C, that's all. And so what left to us to do is to figure out the chemistry inside that separation mechanism. And this is where we have the critical path, is we don't have enough trained scientists to work in this area.
And Edward, we've talked about that. We've written about that, and we've talked about it, that we have some industrial policy now, but what the nation is not looking at really is the labor pool, the talent base. This is mission critical. India and China each produce, I think it's 1 million engineers, and we're producing maybe 50,000 or something. So, and that's across all engineering. So what do you have some ideas? I mean, you're a scientist, you've worked in the corporate you've been in academia, you've worked in the corporate sector, and you've been in the startup sector. What can we do as a nation to um, develop more talent in this area?
So short term, I would lean on the national labs. I mean, they hired the best and the brightest, and I would deploy those guys instead of looking at a specific science. I would focus them on, here's a project. I'm going to throw 10 guys in there, 10 PhDs at this problem. You got 12 months. Give me a stage gate to process this whole project, and having that type of SWAT team to move faster, and having businesses, big and small, as a receiver of that technology to scale. That's what we do short term. Long term, I think part of the change from software to hardware is already happening. Folks looking at physical products to be much more important than software.
Yeah.
And software has its days, but unless we have some physical product that we can produce, we're going to be in trouble.
Yeah. I like, with the national labs, and I don't know if you're collaborating, for example, with Idaho National Labs, but I think we were mentioning before we started that they're a great group of guys. They've been on this show, and they're starting a separation pilot facility, and other important projects are working with industry. So I think that's starting to happen. I think, your observation about national labs getting activated, I think that's happening. So that's a good thing. Dustin, as we get closer towards the end here, any other questions on your mind?
Yeah, I think this is all really interesting what Edward and your team are doing. But I am curious, what keeps you up at night? What are you still trying to figure out?
So two aspects. The funding aspect is always, as a founder, the major task we need to accomplish. And the second is human resources. I think the science is sound, but unless I can have guys or gals dedicated and focused on this every day, we're not going to go anywhere. Right? So very much like in any organization, not funding per se, but the human resources is top of mind for any chief executive.
Absolutely. And we see that in various areas too throughout the industry, is the humans, the personnel, the talent to help drive all this forward is going to be a big hole to fill. So Edward, final question here before we wrap up. What are some milestones people should watch for from your company, Metasorbix, over the next few years to basically that signals to them you are achieving success?
We've been through several accelerators before, so the stages of how to progress is pretty clear. The assuming funding is not an issue, we're going to be progressing from a lab stage to a pilot. Obviously, we're going to have press releases and so forth to indicate capacity. There's a key metric that we commit to, capacity to absorb ions per gram of solvent. From there, looking at larger scale, say a kilo to 10 kilo to 100 kilo type of capacity. And so we're progressing toward pilot scale, and then semi-works, and then toward a bigger plant that we can call it first of a kind. Basically looking at a TRL progression.
Very good. And for those who would like to get in touch with you, follow along, where should we send them?
You can go to our website, or you can send an email to me directly. It's pretty simple. It's edward.chan@metasorbix.com.
Perfect. That's great. And for those who are listening, if you found this episode helpful, please give it a thumbs up so that it shows up for other people as well who might find it useful as well. If you don't want to miss a future show, please subscribe. Edward, thank you so much for being on the show with us. Very informational, very exciting, the work that you're doing in terms of innovating and making the extraction process, the refining, a little more efficient. Hopefully we'll have you get on the show in the future for an update, see how you guys are doing.
Yeah, it's been my pleasure to interact with you guys.
Great. Thank you so much. We'll talk to you soon.
Okay, bye.